back in 2021, 23 Chinese swimmers had positive tests for a substance known as TMZ, which is an automatic 4-year ban. They swept the cases under the carpet. We've done the calculation. There's been 96 medals at the 2021 Olympic Games and the 2024 Olympic Games that have been impacted by the 23 athletes.
Do you believe that there's a state-run doping operation in China? Travis Tygart is the CEO of the U.S. Anti-Doping Agency, best known for leading the investigation that brought down Lance Armstrong. And this one is all about doping in sports. There's someone who's saying that they have a solution for all this. Well, let people take whatever they want.
I don't think the inherent value of sport is watching dope to the gills, chemically enhanced people try to do something. I mean, there is dangerous cultural shift if we go down that path.
I'm honestly fearful for the athletes because, per definition, like they will do everything in their power in order to win. If I can just take 1 extra milligram of testosterone and I will lift more weights than my neighbor, I will do it, right? Until one of us dies.
Yeah.
Travis Tygart, the man who brought down Lance Armstrong. Take us back. How did you get Lance Armstrong on your radar?
In a lot of ways, it was the easiest case we've ever had to deal with because
before the episode starts, I just want to take a couple of seconds to say thank you, because I'm truly, truly grateful that you are willing to spend your valuable time on me, because I know there are plenty of podcasts out there that you could be listening to. And you also probably know that there are shows out there that are much better than me at hacking the algorithm. I don't want to hack the algorithm. I want to make the best episodes that I can. But the way you can help me is by telling the algorithm that what I do is okay, maybe even okay plus, by subscribing to the show or following the show if you're on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, and also liking the episode or saving the episode or sharing the episode with a friend that you think might enjoy it. And if you will do me that kind favor, I promise you that in return, I will make this into the best podcast you've ever listened to. So be curious, keep exploring, and enjoy this episode.
Travis, I've been looking forward to this very much so, because there's something about doping in sports that I find so intriguing, fascinating, interesting. And I have so many questions. We probably won't be able to go through them all. But let's just start. Okay, so the most recent one, I think, is the Chinese swimming team doping scandal. And USADA versus WADA. What's cooking? What's going on? Can you take us back to the start here? What's up with the Swedish?
Ace, Ace, I'm thrilled to be here, and thank you so much for reaching out to us. And look, we think fairness in sport and athletes' rights are so critically important that we look forward to any forum. And I know you're mostly in the music area, and we of course personally love music, so hopefully we can talk about that too at some point. But no, listen, I think it is critically important for athletes and for the world. Sport is a teacher of life lessons, to young kids. And so it being fair, and being a healthy, environment where, young kids around the world can dream of being their heroes and be inspired and know they don't have to cheat to win or be frauds to win or use, potentially dangerous performance enhancing drugs to win is an awesome, responsibility we have. And on the Chinese situation, specifically to your question, unfortunately we've seen a pattern at WADA to not, fully enforce the rules as they're supposed to be enforced. We saw it with Russia. We saw it in weightlifting. We saw it in other examples. And obviously when the China news broke, it was incredibly disturbing to us. And it's really not about, while people want to frame it, USADA versus WADA, it's not about that at all, really. I mean, that's a political frame. And we don't think clean, fair sport is political. It's about integrity. And, we stand on principles and even in, strict enforcement of the rules. And it's why we've been outspoken, because here we go again, not seeing the rules enforced in the way that they should be enforced. And it's why, we're so concerned for our athletes and athletes around the world who are looking to us, the leaders in anti-doping, as a national anti-doping organization, but also, WADA as the global regulator, to ensure fairness across the globe. And that's certainly not what we saw in the Chinese situation.
Yeah, let's get into the weeds. So what happened?
Yeah, so basically a year ago, April of last year, it was announced to the world, through the media that back in 2021, 23 Chinese swimmers had positive tests for a substance known as TMZ, trimetazidine, which is a automatic 4-year ban. It's a drug that's prohibited all the time. So there's some drugs,
what does
right,
that drug
aren't
do?
prohibited. Well, it can help recovery.
Okay.
It can help. It's a prescribed drug in some countries for angina, which is a heart, disease. And so the reason it's prohibited is because it can aid in recovery. It can help, muscle repair in the heart. And so, what's clear is it's prohibited, and it has been. Yeah. And what's also clear is it's tested for all the time. And it also receives a 4-year sanction. So some drugs, let's say marijuana, that's only tested for in competition.
Okay.
And it is subject to potentially a 2-year suspension. But we had an announcement of marijuana not too long ago, and the person received a 1-month suspension. You can go down to 1 month.
Okay.
And this is what's so disturbing about the Chinese situation, where, they didn't follow the rules at all. They swept the cases under the carpet. They're supposed to be public. Yeah. They're supposed to be, unless the evidence demonstrates, a 4-year suspension. And look, we've done the calculation. There's been 96 medals at the 2021 Olympic Games and the 2024 Olympic Games. 18 of those from the U.S. I think 14 potentially gold in between those two games that have been impacted by the 23 athletes. So these are the elite of the elite, who should know better, who shouldn't have positive tests. But if they do have positive tests, the process should work. They should be notified. Samples should be done. They should be provisionally suspended. A case should ensue once the case is over, regardless of the outcome. If you decide it was no fault of theirs, which is legally possible, based on the evidence, but it has to be based on the evidence, then you can say no consequence going forward, but you are disqualified, and it has to be announced. Yeah. And this is what's made us so frustrated, is none of that was done. And they sent the cases to WADA quietly. They were in contact with WADA. Literally, the director general and the chief science officer at WADA had a phone call with the vice minister of Chinese sport the day after WADA got these cases in June of 2021. And remember,
how do you know?
What's that?
How do you know this? Like, how do we know this?
So, well, what's crazy is, so WADA, once a year ago, roughly April of 24, when this got out in the media, WADA's initial position was we did everything right and we would do it the same way all over again. And many of us who are watching this and just reading the news and hearing WADA's excuses just said that can't be the case, because we know that's not what the rules require. And our athletes are calling us and demanding, like, where's accountability for these athletes that, aren't subject to being held to the same rules as, Travis, you hold us to, and other countries, Norway holds its athletes to, and Canada and England and throughout Western Europe and in Asia as well, and Japan and South Korea, who are running programs that follow the rules. It was a clear disregard of the rules. There's no question about that. So when WADA came out so adamantly saying we did everything right and we would do nothing different, many of us were very outspoken to say that's not right. And as a result of our calls for an independent prosecutor, WADA hired a reviewer to review what they did in a very narrow fashion. But even that narrow fashion, he found that, and he published that the director general and the chief science officer had a phone call with the vice minister of sport from China the day after these 23 athletes' cases were handed to WADA. So we know that. And we also know from that same investigators, that reviewer, his review of the documents, that it was not a clear-cut case of contamination. In fact, the Chinese didn't offer the source of any contamination, and that the science was consistent with possibly contamination, but also with intentional use of that prohibited substance. And look, make no mistake, this substance doesn't magically show up in a kitchen, right? And get in the food, and then get in the food at a level that would cause an athlete to have a positive test for it. It just simply doesn't happen. We've never seen it before. And the science, based on WADA's own reviewer, is that it wasn't confirmed contamination. And that's been the position WADA's had from the very beginning, which is also very problematic. But Asa, to be really clear, even if it was contamination, okay, which it wasn't, and WADA's own reviewers determined it wasn't, it still had to be announced. And disqualification still had to happen to those athletes. So there were Chinese athletes that lost in the race in January of 2021 that was held in China. There were Chinese athletes that lost that should have gotten the money, the points, the prizes, the glory. And that's mandatory under the rules. And that didn't happen. And that's why we're outspoken about it.
So what do you believe happened here? Do you believe that there's a state-run doping operation in China in the same fashion that Russia had, or still does? We don't know. Or is this a matter of a couple of athletes doing something wrong and then the Chinese government swooping in, trying to save face?
Yeah. No. Listen, I think that's the unknown, and that's what we've been asking for more investigation. And keep in mind, when the positive test came in 2021, WADA has this large, what we call I&I, Investigation and Intelligence Division. I think they've got 16 people in it. And it was a response to the Russia state-sponsored doping, which was clearly state-sponsored doping that, robbed hundreds of athletes over many years, that was exposed. Well, WADA's excuse at that time, and they testified to this in front of the U.S. Congress back in 2017. I testified there, Michael Phelps, great Olympian, Adam Nelson, another great Olympian, WADA, the IOC. And at that point, they said, look, we couldn't do what we wanted to do because we didn't have a big enough investigative team. They had a chief investigative officer who was actually former U.S. law enforcement. But so they built this big team. But that Cartier report, that self-review that I mentioned previously, he writes in there that the I&I wasn't even involved with these positive tests. They didn't even share these positive tests with the I&I team. So how do we know what actually happened when a couple of people, maybe, lawyers clearly, outside counsel, we don't know if the Chinese vice president was involved. We don't know if the president was involved. These are kind of the questions we've been asking. But make no mistake, two really important points. One, China in the late 90s, a history of state-sponsored doping. And that's clear. And nobody fights that. There was a World Championships, I think, down in Australia where they were suspended and were shown. This was all pre-WADA. And then the second point that I think is really, really important that people have overlooked here, in May of 2020, so about 9 months before these 23 positive tests came into WADA, WADA's investigative team actually sat down in Germany with a Chinese doctor who defected, and she explained to them that the Chinese system, sports system, were giving athletes, she identified, according to WADA's own investigative report, I think 3 substances that they were giving to their athletes at low levels. One of those, in undetectable levels, one of those substances was TMZ. So, I go on facts, right? I'm a lawyer by training. And so as an investigative regulatory body, we have an obligation to look at facts and connect dots and not just stick our head in the sand and ignore and put blinders and the handcuffs on and ignore the evidence that's in our face to fulfill the obligation we have to clean athletes.
It's interesting to me. And what you say there, it makes me wonder, why is it that all of these sports these governmental bodies, or I know what you call them, IOC, UCI, why are they all so effing corrupt? What like FIFA, UEFA? I know they're in a very exposed position, these executives, but like I guess that's what you are claiming, and I understand, like, you're a lawyer and you're tiptoeing around. You don't want to say it directly, I feel like, but you are like, let's be honest. You are saying that WADA is corrupt. We cannot trust WADA. You fear that you are saying that you are not, and we should not trust WADA.
Yeah, I mean, I'm certainly not saying they're corrupt. I think the rules weren't followed, and we deserve answers of why the rules weren't followed, and it's why we're pushing to get answers to why the rules weren't followed, and answers to our athletes of why the rules weren't followed. And what we've heard from WADA all along is unsatisfactory of why the rules weren't followed. So,
shouldn't they welcome an external? Like, shouldn't they be? If I was WADA and I was like, okay, maybe we fucked up. Somebody that I'm responsible for has fucked up. And here is Travis, and he's obviously he has a lot of energy. When he really want to solve this case, I should be like, yes, bring your American money, do like an independent investigation, fix this shit, clean out the mess like that, or else we'll lose all my credibility, because the credibility is the only thing that I offer. Like, the reason why all of these people should pay money to me is that I offer credibility, and the second I lose the credibility, then all bets are off.
Listen, I 100%. If there's nothing there to hide, then open the books, and
even if there's something there to hide, they should, like, to prove their credibility, they should welcome an independent research or investigation.
I totally agree, and it's why we've been so vocal. And look, they've sued us. They brought an ethics complaint against the White House Office of National Drug Control Policy, who was similarly asking for answers. This is the wall the wagons have been circled.
Yeah.
And we haven't been able to get clear answers on what actually happened.
But who are these people?
And people like you and our athletes are connecting the dots to say, what in the world is going on here? How can this system that you're holding us to possibly exist when WADA can just magically decide against the rules that certain countries, China in this case, 96 medals at stake potentially, are not going to be held to the same rules as everyone else. And it's why those of us in the movement are so absolutely, frustrated and are asking for questions. And for me, it's even that much more frustrating, because this is not the first time. This is deja vu. I've seen this WADA horror show multiple times. Russia, we saw it with weightlifting, where there were over 150 cases that from 2009 to 2018 that were open, and weightlifting, the International Federation, was supposed to handle them according to the rules, and WADA was aware of them, and WADA didn't do anything to hold them accountable. So how many times are the world going to keep paying? Look, the Norwegian government, you're in Norway, right?
I'm Norwegian. I'm based in Norway, yes.
Yeah, where are you, in Oslo, or where are you?
Yeah, nearby.
All right, you're nearby. So, yeah, well, I love your country, by the way. What a fantastic place it is. But look, the Norwegian government and governments throughout Europe are paying WADA, its budget every year. The U.S., because of this and the failure to get answers and the failure to be satisfied by what actually took place in the decision-making process, the U.S. government said we're not going to pay WADA.
I saw that, but how is that solving anything, by the way? Because I saw that, and I understand that this is a very hard situation to be in, because you don't believe in WADA's credibility, and you won't admit it, but you believe that they're corrupt, and then so the people in charge now, they should go. I guess that's what you want. You want change in some way, but like the American athletes, like the testing will only get worse when you're not paying. I'm guessing as per usual, the United States are paying the most. So without the funding from the United States, I'm guessing that WADA is in like the testing will get worse. The cheating might get even worse.
They'll for sure want to and try to use scare tactics. That's the case, but that's not the case at all. Because remember, WADA doesn't test. They don't do a single test. All they do is oversee national anti-doping organizations like us, like China, like Norway, and to make sure we're following the rules. And if we don't follow the rules, they enforce us or hold us accountable for not following the rules. And then they do the same with International Sport Federation. So WADA doesn't test at all. It's not going to hurt athletes at all. They've put in austerity measures, which means, from what we've been informed, is their staff now has to fly coach class.
Okay.
And I'm sure they will say it will impact research or other things, but look, let's be honest about it. And look, nobody likes that.
No.
We don't like
fly
not
coach
having to pay our money.
No, I'm just kidding.
Right? We want to support WADA. We want to have a strong, independent WADA. And frankly, before 2014, when the IOC put in an IOC executive board member as the WADA president, and then Russia happened, we were lockstep with WADA. We were best friends with WADA. We did a lot together with WADA to improve the movement, from bringing in non-analytical positive cases to bringing in, athlete biological passport. So many things that we did from WADA's beginning. And look, we would go to Congress with WADA and try to get them more money from the U.S. If we felt like that was good money being spent on a true global regulator that was unbiased, but unfortunately history has shown us since really 2014, 2015, that's just not the case. And so now that's the only real leverage that the U.S. government has, or we have. We don't have a seat at the WADA table to try to enact some reform, especially when they just flat out refuse to answer some of the basic questions about how the rules weren't followed in these cases.
You said something interesting there. You don't have a seat at the WADA table. Who's got a seat at the WADA table? Who are these people?
Yeah. And when I say there, it's the U.S. The U.S. government was blocked out for many years. They returned to the executive committee. So there's a WADA executive committee that is governments, sport, and some independent people selected by WADA, the chair and the vice chair, or the president and the vice president. And then there's the foundation board. The executive committee has the day-to-day oversight of management and decision-making. And the executive committee wasn't even made aware of these Chinese cases. Can you imagine?
Why is I'm still I was left at the foundation board and executive board. Why the F? These things have such a tendency to become so bloated, and like there's decision making for decision makers. Let's fucking leave WADA alone for a second. But a cynic would say that this is just geopolitics. This is just U.S. versus China. So
listen. We were go back and look at the record. We were accused during our Lance Armstrong investigation in 2010 to 2012.
Oh, we will go there as well.
Of being anti-American.
Yeah.
Right? Like we were attacked for being anti-American. And then when the Russia situation came up, we were accused of being anti-Russian. And then when the weightlifting situation came up, you're against IWF and weightlifting. And now, you're against China. It's politics. This has nothing to do with politics. If this has something to do with politics, we're terrible politicians, right? Yeah. Like we're the worst. Yeah. Because where we are is our athletes are getting potentially robbed by these countries. Yeah. We're not paying our dues. We're hosting the Olympic Games. This has nothing to do with politics. It's easy and convenient for politicians to throw that out and accuse others of that. But this is simply about principle. What has remained the same at this organization is us standing on the principle to support athletes, whether you're a Russian athlete, a French athlete on U.S. Postal, or got robbed by U.S. Postal athletes who are all American and sponsored by an American company. We're going to take a stand to support clean athletes. And it's no different now if you lift the hood and go beyond some ridiculous sound bites and PR statements that WADA is trying to, convince everyone of and divert attention away from the real issues on.
Yeah. When was USADA founded?
Yeah, 2000. We opened our door. Actually, it's our 25th anniversary.
Wow. Congratulations.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. I thought you'd be sending us some champagne or something, you know?
Haven't I? Yeah.
We should do this in a pub in Oslo.
Yeah, let me know. Yeah. No, but because the reason why
Yeah, so we opened our doors, and look, the climate under which we opened our doors, and I was an outside lawyer to the organization at that time. And listen, and we readily admit this, the reputation of the United States in anti-doping was terrible. There were the infamous 13. There was allegations. You know, we won the 96 Olympics. We were headed into the 2000 Olympics with, you know, Marion Jones, who was going to be the darling of the game. She ended up winning 5 medals, unprecedented for a single track and field athlete. Again, it turned out we got evidence that she doped.
Yeah.
And you know what? We had to take back those 5 medals.
Yeah.
We didn't like that. That was terrible for the United States and our Olympic team and the international Olympic movement. But that's what our job is. That's the promise we make to clean athletes. So we got started in 2000, and have, you know, tried our best. And look, I mean, it's a compliment and defense of WADA. This is a really tough area, right? Like, it's complex science, the rules. I mean, you talked about the bloat and all the different boards and committees, and the WADA program has over 2,600 pages of rules to it.
Yeah, okay.
It's ridiculous, right? Like, it's way, way overregulated to try to control everybody. Yeah. At the point, then you're willing to throw those rules out and give certain countries a break, like was done in the Chinese situation, which is pretty remarkable. But look, in their defense, I think it was a horrible day when they got sent 23 positive tests on 13 athletes from China. It was 23 athletes, but 13 of them were on the Chinese swim team that were going to the Tokyo Summer Olympic Games. Yeah. And so for them to actually enforce the rules was likely going to, you know, the outcome, those athletes were going to come off the team right on the eve of the games. And that's your worst nightmare. Yeah. Just like when the Lance Armstrong evidence came that he cheated the world for, you know, years, and we had to wipe away 7 tours de France, or Marion Jones having to take back 5 medals. Dude, that is a terrible day for anybody that loves sport and what sport does, and that athletes felt the need to do that, to be the best. But we're not an international federation. We're not a sports promotion organization. We're a rule enforcement organization, and we have to enforce the rules without fear or favor for whoever breaks them. And that's exactly what we did, and it's exactly what WADA should be doing. And unfortunately, they haven't shown the ability to do that.
We have to talk about Lance. I know you've talked up and down about Lance Armstrong. We have to visit him afterwards. But first, there's someone who's saying that they have a solution for all this. And it's just like, let's just skip WADA. Let people take whatever they want. And you know, I'm guessing you've of course heard of the enhanced games, which is now also, they have set a date. I honestly thought that this will never happen, but they've set a date, so it's going to happen. And I'm guessing you're adamantly against it. But if you were to steelman enhanced games, like, are you able to do so?
What'd you say, if I was able to do what?
To steelman, to advocate for it, like to find some positives about the enhanced games.
No, listen, I think it's not the solution, as you said. I think, you know, markets. One, I would take a step back. There's been open competition, right? This is not all that new. They may be marketing it better and have a slicker name or whatever, and have more money behind it. But there's been open competitions in wrestling, professional wrestling, and bodybuilding and other sports for years. And I don't think there's a marketplace for it. You know, it is here in the United States, the free market, as it is in many countries. But, you know, I don't think the inherent value of sport is watching dope to the gills, chemically enhanced people try to do something. I mean, there is like NASCAR, right? Where you're in a machine. We don't like the Tour de France because there's a motor in the bike, you know, carrying these riders up the mountain. We like it because it's us dreaming that, oh my gosh, with a little bit more work, a little bit more commitment, I might be able to do that. And, you know, and back in my day, I could shoot a 3-pointer like Steph Curry did in the Olympic Games to beat, you know, France. Yeah. So those are like the headwinds, I think, against anything like the enhanced games. I do however, think it should be a wake-up call to those of us in our world to say, you know what, the Olympic movement is supposed to be based on fairness, safety, health, and fair competition. And you know, we're by us not enforcing the rules fairly and evenly, we're opening up the door for these other opportunities. And I don't agree with it at all. I think it's sad that athletes, you know, feel compelled to be tempted by it because of the money.
Yeah.
But it also ought to force us to look at, you know, are our Olympic athletes getting what they deserve from a monetary standpoint and my lane,
Bingo.
a fair competition standpoint. And so I don't, you know, look, I don't. It is what it is. It'll happen as it happens. I think competition is always good, and I think if you know the system is overly worried about this, we ought to look at ourselves and say, how can we be better, and how can we double down and triple down on ensuring our rules work, are fair, and looking at how we can provide athletes so they're not tempted by some dangerous, you know, circus.
I fucking love your take on this. That's exactly how one should take this. And I think too many people, that's a very American take on this. The Norwegian take is like, oh no, change competition. Oh, we have to ban. We have to spend a lot of energy on trying to hurt their reputation. We have to and I think that your take is the only correct take. We have to. How can we outcompete them?
I woke up this morning. You know, at 6:30 to a statement out of the WADA president attacking us and using the enhanced games, you know, as a way to attack us. And so, I think when the outlet asked us, you know, about an hour and a half later for a comment after it had already run, right?
Yeah.
In response to the article and the statements, I just said, look, I think that's a fundamental misunderstanding of by Banca of the way free and democratic and free markets work. We certainly aren't encouraging it and investing in it, but I also don't think we should be fearful of it. I think it's not a solution, and that's a free market democratic view potentially. But at the end of the day, we should control what we can control, which is our Olympic movement, and we should make it as we should demonstrate to the world that it is the best and there is no alternative, and you shouldn't even be tempted because the money is right, because the fairness is right, because this is safe and healthy, and this is what the world wants to see.
Yeah. I think that enhanced games it's not because of WADA and USADA. I think it's because of the IOC. It's a response to the lack of monetary compensation for Olympic athletes, which is a shame. I think like if you do all other kinds of sports, almost you get paid fair. At least privatized sports, like if you play in the NFL or the UFC, or we can touch on UFC after. I hope. And privatized sports, you get paid well because that's how it works. But for some reason, the Olympic, like the IOC, have been able to create this crazy thing where they have all these athletes investing all their time, their whole lives to compete, and they don't get paid, which is
listen. I think what's really clear, and I'm you know, my lane obviously is anti-doping, but I see the issues you're raising, and I agree. I think, you know, in the U.S. model, you have players associations, and the players have equal bargaining power to, you know, divvy up the revenues, to have representation on the policies. And I think that pro sport model in the U.S. at least, it clearly doesn't exist in the Olympic movement. And I think athletes' rights get trampled a lot of the times. I think they're even an anti-doping. I mean, we've said it from the very beginning. There should be independent athlete voices and vote at the table, so there can be a real and meaningful. And the system will talk about, well, we have athletes, but many of the athletes that serve in these roles serve in multiple roles with their federation, with their NOC, with their IF, with WADA's committee here, WADA's committee there. And they're not truly able to, you know, decide things without always worrying about, well, what's going to happen to me, in my other role? Are they going to kick me off and I lose my per diem or my credential to the Olympic Games or whatever it might be? So I totally agree with you. And I think there's a lot of movement. I would hope to try to change that, not let competitors come in and take it on and in a dangerous way, like, you suggested the Enhanced Games is trying to do because of that, but fix this system and let's be candid and honest about what the system does and where the improvements could be made for the athletes as well as ultimately the brand of the Olympic movement.
Yeah, I will watch it though, the Enhanced Games. I'm kind of. I'm I'm looking forward to it in the same way that I'm gonna watch it the same way that I might watch a car crash if I drive by it. Like that's what I fear, because I'm honestly fearful for the athletes, because and I don't know if they haven't thought this through, but the athletes will per definition, like they will do everything in their power within their physical means in order to win. Like they are extreme competitors. And if they can take unlimited drugs, if I can just take 1 extra milligram of testosterone and I will lift more weights than my neighbor, I will do it,
if
right?
you think about it, I mean,
until one of us dies.
Yeah, I mean, and look, I used to love having the conversation. I would hear it, and look, we at one point during the Balco scandal, when Jose Canseco, one of the best Major League Baseball players, came out and was talking about the daily use of human growth hormone. How, we thought, look, that's a pretty dangerous view of society if suddenly it's okay to start using these substances for, they're providing modafinil to apparently med students in certain countries.
Yeah.
So it can keep them up, when they're working hard hours and keep their mind fresh and sharp. It's a dangerous cultural shift if we go down that path. But look, I think you have to look at it as it's not a level fair playing field. If you can use drugs, right? Because people respond differently to the drugs. And we saw this issue within athlete circles. They call it responder versus non-responder.
Yeah.
So in our cycling investigation, we had some athletes that would say, I couldn't use human growth hormone because it made my legs tired and heavy. Yeah. Where other athletes would say, oh no, human growth hormone really helped me. That's all I used because it was so good. And we know certain of these drugs affect different people in different ways. So one, I don't think if you said, here are the rules and you can use whatever, it's going to be fair. No, because different people respond differently to those drugs. Number two, I think really all you do is move the line, right? Because if it's safe to use 100 cc's, every other day of testosterone, and that's going to give you a certain amount of, performance benefit, well, why not use, 200 cc's or 300 cc's? So they're assumably they're setting a rule that is arguably based on some safety, but athletes that want to win, right? Especially if there's no testing program, they're just going to go. So all you're doing, it's an arms race still.
Yeah.
I would say number 3, the market, right? Like you said, it saddens me that you would want to watch it, but I get the circus element and, Vegas show men's deal around it. But I don't think there's a market value for it, right? Like I think if there was a market value for it, you would already see it and have seen it for years in professional sport. And then just the last point, and sorry to drone on, but the last point, it can't be that our kids think that in order to break a world record or in order to be the best athlete, I have to use these drugs. Because then, at least in the United States, where, youth sport is, both in the school system, but also in private clubs, but is also in the university system where they're given a lot of money now, but in the past too, for scholarships, and millions of kids around the United States, parents are putting them in youth sport so they can get scholarships to go to college in order to get a college education, never really thinking they're going to be professional athletes one day. And that's such a small percentage. Nobody in their right mind and, would really think that's going to happen. However, for sure, you can obtain some scholarship money. And I've got 3 kids that or, last one's now just graduating from high school, and, they played sports growing up, and a lot of their friends got scholarships and are going on to, attend universities based on scholarships through their sports system. So what happens if suddenly it's okay to use these at the elite level? Well, you're going to have to use it at the college level in order to be the best. And then you're going to have to use it at the high school level. And then, so that trickle down impact, it's at what age are we willing to, spend the money, but also risk the health, injecting our 8-year-olds with testosterone so they can kick the ball a little bit better in eight and under soccer or football? I don't think so.
Yeah.
But
I agree with you in that. And you said something philosophically interesting there, is that I think one of the arguments from enhanced games for allowing this is that, like, genetics is unfair, right? So some people, like, I can work out at the gym and my friend can work out a tenth of the time and look much better and be much stronger than me because he has better genetics. And at the same way, like some people might be a good responder for drugs. It's like I could be that, right, if I tried it, and then we have the same like unfairness with the drugs. So it's hard to level the playing field that way. And I completely agree with you. I think it's a dangerous path to walk down. I want to watch it for the spectacle, and they've done a great job marketing it. And maybe I'm just a hooligan, a Norwegian hooligan that want to.
I think you said it. It's like watching a car crash. You're going to watch it maybe, and I'm sad that you will. But if you choose to,
I will.
That's your right.
Yeah, I'm
right?
honest.
Like,
I can be honest.
I'm not like
I'm dressing up.
Not be your friend because you. I'm not going to disown you or not be your friend because you watch it. But you, like a lot of people have said to me, they may watch it, but they'll feel kind of dirty when they do.
Yeah, and right? I think
that's
not
the way
I
appreciate.
Yeah, that's the way I see it. But we have to move on. And Lance Armstrong, we have to talk about Lance Armstrong. Travis Tygart, the man who brought down Lance Armstrong. And take us back. When did this hunt for Lance Armstrong start? And I'm saying hunt because, you take it's your word. Like, when did this start? How did you get Lance Armstrong on your radar, and when? No,
and listen, I shake my head anytime, and I get and understand the frame and the language. So I'm not attacking you for using it. I get it, but. I'm not the man, and we're not the entity that brought down Lance Armstrong. But make no mistake, right? Like Lance Armstrong and the decisions of him and his teammates and his advisors, that's what brought them down.
Yeah. But if not for you, Lance Armstrong would have still been the winner of 7 Tour de France's. You were the last. I think, you were the last. Like, without you, I think he would have been free.
Well, we just simply did what the rules require us to do, and the oath that we take, right, is to enforce the rules. And look, in a lot of ways, it was the easiest case we've ever had to deal with because it was the most overwhelming package of evidence of clear intent to defraud and
was it
win.
Was it okay?
For many years.
Take me back. I want to hear this because the reason why I'm asking this so bluntly is that I feel like this was long after he had retired. This was after his career was over. You guys took him down.
He was still in. If you remember, he was still in triathlon, right? Like so. What happened was, there was always some smoke, and there was never any firm evidence. He did a good job of, even under oath, lying about it and suing people and just denying it. So while there was some smoke and conversation, there was never any hardcore evidence, direct or even circumstantial evidence outside of, winning 7 in a row, which is pretty miraculous if you think about it. Never been done before or since. That, Floyd Landis had a positive test at the 2006 Tour de France. We handled that case. He got a suspension. When he was coming back, the Peloton, Pro Cycling, basically kept him out of coming back. And Lance in particular did, I think, as well. And it was at that point, we reached out through an intermediary to Landis, offering again to sit down with him if he had information. And he decided that he wanted to do that. And what we told him was, look, you have to be truthful with us on all the questions. You can't, hold back information on the friends you still have in the Peloton, or people that have stopped competing, or yourself. And you have to be truthful. And, if you're not truthful with us, then we're not going to be able to rely on you and what you tell us. But if you do that, we'll take this to the nth degree, wherever that may lead, right? If that means Lance Armstrong, if that means Postal, if that means others, if that means leaders of the sport itself, we're determined to get to it. And look, that was incredibly helpful. And that led us to then following up with additional athletes who we now know, okay, there was a team bus that pulled over in France and several of them did blood transfusions. So we go and talk to those athletes, and those athletes became truthful, and more started to build. And then we contacted the sport itself, UCI, and asked them for past blood sampling and past test results. And then we saw, in fact, there were prior tests that Armstrong had that the sport didn't handle as they should have from the 99 tour. Yeah. In fact, the 2001 Tour de Suisse, the retesting from 98 and 99. So there were plenty of evidence direct from a testing standpoint. So, we put all that together. We actually approached Armstrong, Lance, to sit down with us before we initiated our case, because we initiated, conversations with several of the other athletes, and there were ultimately 11 total that came forward that acknowledged their own doping, that were truthful with us. And we tried to do the same with Lance. Yeah. He ultimately refused to do that. And in fact, then sued us and all this other stuff. And of course, attacked us and went to Capitol Hill to get legislation put in to try to stop us from doing our job. And look, we just simply said, if the world doesn't want us doing our job, then we should shut down and we'll all go find new jobs. But don't ask us to do a job and then get mad at us when we do that job, because, one of our heroes, and look, he was a hero to me too. I was taking the 99 Texas bar in Texas that summer right after law school, and I watched every day that they showed it while I'm studying for the bar exam. I had a framed photo in my office of Armstrong on his bike that said, people ask me what I'm on. What I'm on is my bike for 8 hours a day, busting my ass, working hard to be the best. And so, we're all crushed when our heroes do things like that. But at the end of the day, our job is to set aside our personal feelings, be objective, unbiased, and just simply enforce the rules. And like I said, it was one of our easier cases because the evidence was so overwhelming, and it was really an existential decision. We gonna do the job that we're paid to do, or are we gonna not? And
but did you
that's a pretty simple question to answer.
Yeah. Did you offer if you spoke to George Hincapie, right? His best friend. And he even told on Lance, if you will. But didn't you offer these guys, his teammates, didn't they get offered something in order to kind of get them to tell on Lance?
Yeah, no, 100%. Yeah, no, look, the rules allow and for you to reduce sanctions. So, many of them went from 2 years down to 6 months. Yeah. It's called substantial assistance under the rules. It's from our perspective, when we heard the evidence we heard and gathered the evidence we gathered, what we realized is that we could give full sanctions to all the athletes, but we were just going to postpone the dirty culture for a year or two, and it'd be dirty again, because the people in the system, the doctors, the team leaders, the team owners, even the people running the sport, who had an obligation to ensure clean sport, they turned a blind eye to it. And I mentioned the 99 Tour de France positive test that Armstrong had. The head of the sport turned a blind eye to it. They didn't want to deal with it in the way that the rules required. The whole thing could have stopped then, but it didn't, because the sport. So we literally around our office used the term, our goal in this investigation is to dismantle the corrupt system. And wipe out all of those in the system that are turning a blind eye to what's really going on, and not just punish the athletes. While, listen, the athletes had to receive punishment, and they did make choices. They were choices under duress, right? And while several left the sport because they refused to do what the team was asking them to do, that's not really much of a choice. And so we were going to be sympathetic and empathetic to the athletes to allow them to take advantage of the rules that would lessen their suspension. But just as importantly, on balance, we needed them to participate because, you know, coaches aren't in our testing program. No. Team doctors aren't in our testing program. We have to have direct evidence via testimony, via emails, exchanges, to hold those people accountable. And that was our number one goal. So we were perfectly fine, you know, you following the rules that allow for it to happen that way and giving a break to the athletes. And look, we would have done the same for Lance.
Yeah, because this is
like
my question. Because I love you for that, for what you did there. And I think that cycling is in a much better place today than it would have been without this whole circus, let's call it that. But do you think that Lance Armstrong still would have been like kept the 7 Tour de France's if he had participated at the?
You know, he probably. I think honestly, our analysis at the time was if he came forward, we were going to offer him the same 6 months.
Yeah,
and actually we were pushing for amnesty for all athletes around the world. We sort of were pushing for a truth and reconciliation commission,
yeah,
because the sport was dirty,
100%,
and we wanted to clean it out. And so, you know what, the riders I mentioned from the U.S. that we had jurisdiction over, and there was a Canadian and also there was a Norwegian as well, and a few others from around the world. But they ended up getting 6 months disqualification. We would have given that to Lance. There was some chance he would have kept 2 of the Tour de France's. I think it was 2. Might have been 3, because the statute of limitation had changed. And so he would have gotten the benefit of the prior statute of limitation. So he very well could have kept 2 of those, you know, because he lied and covered up,
yeah,
and then didn't fight. Those were ultimately erased as well.
But why though? But I want to talk about the Norwegian guy because it's an interesting story of him. Stefan Kjærgaard. Do you remember him? Stefan, yeah. Because he was the head of the Norwegian Cycling Association when this. I don't know if you remember this. But that it's a sad story in the sense that he got in Norway we have this holier than thou view on our athletes, and if you get if there's even smoke around you, we go ape shit. We hate you. You are ostracized. You're not Norwegian anymore, and I think that to some extent it's a good thing in that I think there's a very high bar for Norwegian to cheat at sports, because you know that the consequences you have to flee the country forever if you get caught, but at the same time the problem is that. As you mentioned, and this is my view on this, and I think this is what Lance is trying to say, and of course he's not the man to say it, is that the sport was different back then. And if you came from the US or from Norway and you came down to Southern Europe, to France, Italy, Spain, where the culture was different, and this was in the 90s, and you saw that you might have been the greatest biker, cyclist or whatever it's called in Norway or in the US. And then you come down there and you see that I'm shit. So either the thing that I've spent my whole life up until this point at, my only goal, my only dream, I don't have the grades. I cannot go to law school with Travis. This is the only thing I know how to do. And the only thing I've ever been great at.
No, listen.
Then I have to do what everybody else is doing. And that was the culture.
Listen, I get it 100%. I mean, Lance's quote is, you know, we showed up in Europe and we're in a knife fight and we don't have any knives. So, you know, we ended up bringing guns to the knife fight, and then everybody else got guns. So I totally get it. I think it's a understandable human ultra competitive, hyper competitive athlete view of it. You know, I think it's an unfortunate culture to put athletes in. And I asked Lance when I met with him, we met 2 or 3 times, and I said, all right, if USADA was in existence in 1999 or 98, your first tour, or 99, and you saw that, would you have picked up the phone and called us and asked us to do something about it? You know, and look, I think to some extent, the sport itself is to blame for allowing that culture to rise up and not do anything about it. Certainly the athletes made their decisions. And what I would say is not everyone chose to do it. Okay. Some competed.
100%.
They didn't win, but they competed. Others, like I mentioned, Scott Mercier, Darren Baker, these could have been Tour de France winners from the United States. They chose not to do it. And if you were to hear from them and others, they would tell you, look, the team, they ran clean athletes out because they refused to give us contracts if we were unwilling to do this. So don't say like everyone agreed and everyone had to do it, because they ran off those who were unwilling to do it. But then the second point is, I mean, it wasn't fair that way either. And in fact, if you look at our Johan Bernil case, who was the general manager or the team director of U.S. Postal, you'll see that they actually held certain processes, certain drugs and methods, blood transfusion in particular, in just the hands of a few people. And Lance is the one that was the gold standard. If you were going to cheat, that's what you wanted to use. There was no real test for it. While it took an infrastructure and took some money, it gave you the best bang for your buck from a performance standpoint and inability for us to detect it. And so they only kept that in a few people's hands because they didn't want everyone else having that, because they might have actually been better and been the Tour de France winner, even as a team a postal team rider. So, I think this idea that everyone was doing it and thus it made it a fair level competition is just not all that accurate.
No, and I agree with you. And I think that the issue might be that the winner of the 91, 92, 90, like Miguel Indurain, obviously a cheater, obviously a doper. Bjarne Riis, the Danish hero from 96, like he has like hematocrit, I don't know what the word is, hematocrit levels of 96 or something, which is like most people, that's borderline dying. 97, Ulrich, 98, Pantani, all of them have kept their yellow jerseys. They're still celebrated. They're still paraded down to Tour de France. They can go around the country, while Lance he's persona non grata. I think that is...
Listen, it was one of the reasons that we pushed so hard for him to come in and work with us, because I told him this when we met in December of 2013 up in Denver, Colorado. I said, look, you with your influence and your relationships, if we can get an amnesty and a truth and reconciliation, we can get all this out in the open and let everyone go about to redemption and get the secrets out, and you'll be seen in the same light as everyone else. And we know it's not just you, but we need evidence and we need proof and we need people to come forward. And it was why it was so disappointing that he decided not to do that. I think we still had some success. The president of the sport got thrown out. The honorary president got thrown out. The head medical director got thrown out. The general counsel got thrown out. But there were a lot of doping that I think we believe, and you alluded to some that went on, that was never exposed in the way
they
that
weren't Americans.
Been exposed.
It wasn't your responsibility, and but Travis, like
but we do. We take we this system should take responsibility for that. I mean, those were sleepless nights, around that time period, not being able to do that to the full level that we wanted to do it, because the system's got to be fair and even, and it can't just be, Marion Jones losing 5 medals if someone from another country is also cheating and not being held accountable. The whole system falls apart, and it's why we've been so outspoken here, recently around this Chinese situation, right?
Yeah, it's a good full circle thing.
Well, if you have a belief in justice and a commitment to justice, you don't, and if you talk with athletes and the sacrifice they go through, I'm about to meet after this interview with a 4-time medalist on Team USA cycling, and she's had terrible injuries. She has foregone her career, having a family. She puts in unbelievable time and effort. She has to be worried about what medications she takes, or what lotions, or what supplements or vitamins she eats, and it's hard being an elite level athlete. And then you put on top of it these WADA requirements for those athletes are willing to do it, as long as it results in what is promised, which is a fair and level, clean playing field. And that's why we're so passionate about making sure the rules are enforced as best they possibly can, because individual athletes deserve that.
Yeah. Do you ever think that you will talk to Lance again? Have you talked with him? You said in 2023. How was that conversation?
Yeah, it was good. Well, I mean, we met just the two of us, and yeah, you know, we had a good conversation. And,
what did you talk about?
We met for a while, and then we met again. And no, I mean, I listen. It's not, none of this is personal. We did what the rules required, and I have a lot of empathy for him. And you know, I hope that. I mean, look, he was a hero to a lot of people in a lot of different ways. He made some really bad decisions. I think he's recognized that now and has acknowledged that. So I wish nothing but the best for him and whatever he decides to do, for sure. Yeah. And I mean, with all athletes, I mean, we meet with athletes that get sanctioned all the time. Some inadvertently, others intentionally. And this is not, you know, we're not here to crush them as people or their lives. We, in fact, want to help, you know, rebuild them and redeem them. And we think there are stories that they can tell and share, if truthful and honest, that can help the next generation of athletes and the sport not find itself in the position that, you know, cycling found itself in the late 90s and early 2000s, for sure.
Travis, this has been a blast. You are the man, and I salute you for what you're doing. You are relentlessly chasing a clean sport. And
you're the man. We didn't even talk about music. No. I thought I was coming on here to talk about music.
Let's do that when you come to Oslo.
Who's your favorite band?
Oh, there's too many. You have to come to Oslo. We can do this.
All right.
Okay, what's your favorite band then? That could be the end of this.
Mine's easy. U2.
Oh,
hands down.
Okay.
That's my favorite band. I sometimes play the Norwegian band. You know, what does the fox say?
Oh, Ylvis.
You remember that?
Yeah, I remember that.
You remember that song?
That's different from U2.
I sometimes play that song in presentations where you've heard this term, the fox guarding the hen house.
Yes, I've heard that. And Ylvis, you know, Ylvis, they're amazing musicians actually, but they are comedians first and foremost in Norway. It was very strange that when they became the biggest music export of Norway for a period of time there, they were just like we have no idea what we're doing here.
I play a clip of theirs in my sometimes in my presentations to audiences to excite them about what does the fox say.
Cool we'll let them know.
Anyway, hey, so thanks so much for inviting us. While we didn't talk about music, which is what I thought we were going to do, I had a good time, and I really appreciate your kind comments about us and what we're trying to do. We're obviously not perfect, and we're just trying to be better every single day. And I think just like the athlete, champion, Olympic medalist mentality, where you look at your performance and you make it better each time to be the best. Us in anti-doping, we owe that to do the same to athletes. And that's all we are here to do, both for ourselves, but also the system that our athletes are relying on, to protect their rights. So, thanks for the opportunity to come on and talk a little bit about what we do.
The proof is in the pudding, and you are making the biggest pudding as of now. So continue to do that. Thank you for your time. Say hi to Avery and ciao, ciao.
Awesome. Thanks. All right. Bye-bye.